Okay, welcome to tonight's class. Tonight we are going to look at data types in JavaScript. JavaScript data types. Now, data types just simply means types of data in JavaScript. Before now, we've only been considering numbers, just numbers. After tonight's class, we'll start looking at other things aside numbers. Now, at least from our elementary school, a computer is defined as an electronic machine that accepts data, processes it, and gives out information. Now, a computer does not just accept any data. There are some specific types of data that a computer receives. Each computer is programmed to receive some specific types of data, and that's what we want to look at today. Types of data that JavaScript accepts. Like I said, a computer is programmed to accept a specific type of data. So we want to look at types of data that JavaScript allow. Now, we've been looking at numbers and we've been doing something like this. So this 7 is a number. Now, a number can either be a floating number, that is a number with decimal. Is a float. A number with decimal number is a float. It's also allowed in JavaScript. Or a whole number. A whole number is referred to as integer. So this is an integer. That is numbers without decimal. So this is an integer and this is a float. But in JavaScript, we group all of them as numbers. JavaScript can process numbers. Let's proceed. Now, there is an inbuilt command in JavaScript to check the data type of any variable. And that command is called type of. Let's do something. I can say type of, tell me the data type of 8. So this command is used to, this type of is used to tell us the data type of anything. So in this case, I'm telling JavaScript, or I'm asking JavaScript to tell us the data type of 8. Remember, I said 8 is under number. In JavaScript, both integer and floating numbers, that's floats, they are all under number. Some other programming languages separate them, but JavaScript group them together under number. So if I run this, of course I'm not going to see anything on the screen. Nothing will be shown on the screen. That's because we are here to use an output command. I can just put it inside an alert. I can say alert type of 8. So if you run this will give us number. Let's move on. I can say type of 8.2. It will still give us number. Then next is, we need to know that the data type of a variable is the data type of the value of that variable. Don't worry if it looks confusing, I'll clarify it now. This is the value that I am storing inside this variable A. So if the data type of this, since it's number, then definitely the data type of this variable is also number. So the data type of a variable is the data type of the value inside that variable. You know, a variable is a container. So the data type of the variable inside, of the value inside that container, is also the data type of the container itself. So if I say alert type of A, this will also give me number. So JavaScript can process number. Let's look at other data types. We have the boolean. Boolean is anything that's either true or false. So JavaScript can also process a Boolean data, that is a data that is either true or false. So if I say variable a is true and I say type of a, it is Boolean. Again, remember, the essence of learning data type is a data type. These data types will tell us the types of data that you can process in JavaScript. Meaning, if it's not among the data type, if what you are bringing is not among the data types that can be processed in JavaScript, JavaScript will not be able to process it. So the data type of a variable will tell JavaScript if it can process this thing, one, and how to process it, making two. It will tell us, it will tell JavaScript if it can be processed, because JavaScript will check, is it among those things I can process? If it's among, fine, it will process it. Then it will also tell JavaScript how to process it. You will understand this more in today's class, this how to process it. So this is Boolean. If it's also false, it is also Boolean, true or false. Anything that is either true or false is a Boolean. Let's move on. Next thing is anything aside these two, well, cannot be processed by JavaScript directly. It can be processed directly by JavaScript. So what's the implication of this? If I come here, let me remove this. Variable my name equals to Taye, and I say alert my name. Variable my name equals to Taye. Here we have alert my name. If you run this, normally you expect that this should display Taye.
Yes.
But somehow it is not. It is not. The reason is because this Taye is not a number and is not a Boolean. Since it's not any of these two,
okay,
then JavaScript cannot process it directly. We see how JavaScript can, how we are going to handle it in JavaScript. But since it's not a number and it's not a Boolean, JavaScript can't process it directly. Let's go to the browser and see something. Go to the console. I think we looked at the console in our last class. We talked about here bit. Taye is not defined. What does this mean? Now, JavaScript is telling us that it doesn't understand the meaning of Taye. I will give my explanation on this. See, when you write anything in JavaScript, let's say alert James. When JavaScript sees this, it asks itself, is this thing, is it a number? No. Is it a Boolean? No. Then it must be a container. If it's not a container, it will throw back an error. Meaning, if I run this, it will throw back an error. James is not a number, it's not a Boolean. JavaScript expects it to be a container. A container in this case can be a variable like this. I can say variable James equals to 5. So you know, in this case now, James is a container. Alert James. So this will alert 5 because James is a container. But if I just write alert James alone, JavaScript will ask itself, is this a number? No. Is this a Boolean? No. Then it needs to be a container. It assumes that it's a container. But after checking through our code, it will realize that this is not even a container. Then it will tell me, please, I don't understand the meaning of James. That's why we have this James is not defined. Now, the container can either be a JavaScript container. You know, containers in JavaScript are variables. It can either be a JavaScript container or HTML container. Meaning, if it's not this, then it can be a container in HTML like this. Let's say we have a div, then I can give it an ID called James. So it can be this. It can be this. So JavaScript expects that whatever you put here is either a container in JavaScript or HTML. If it's not in any of the two, it assumes that it's a number or a boolean. If it's not that, it throws back an error. Do you have any questions, sir?
No question yet. It's clear. That's it.
Let's move on. Next is, let's get a variable called my name, and let's say my name is Taye. So like I said, this is expected to throw back an error. How then do I store my name, this Taye, as the value of my name? What we do is this. We want to tell JavaScript that this Taye is not a container. We want to inform JavaScript that this is not a container. In fact, don't process it as a container. Process it as ordinary texts, because it assumes that this is a container. That's why it's throwing back an error, and unfortunately it's unable to see that container. So a way of telling JavaScript that this is ordinary text and not a container is to put it in quotes. What is in quotes? JavaScript now sees it as just mere text and not a container. The idea behind this can be traced back to English language. Whenever you place anything in quotes in English language, you are just telling the receiver now that, see, I didn't process this thing. I'm relaying it back to you in the exact words of the speaker. You are just telling the person that take it as it is. So what we are doing here is we are telling JavaScript to take this as it is, not to process it, just to see it as mere text and not as a container. So in this case, this text now will now be saved as the value of my name. So we can now alert my name. So this will give us Taye. So whatever you place within quotes is known as string. Whatever is within quotes is known as string. That's another data type. So if I say,
okay,
Kenny, this is a string and this is another data type. If I check the type of my name, it will be string. Any questions, sir?
No question. It's understandable.
Okay. So we've checked 3 data types, but before we leave this thing, I need to talk about this. Now, if I place this 7 in this quote like this, because it is now within quotes, it is a string, not a number. It is a string, not a number. Data type of a variable tells JavaScript if that variable is processable, 1, and also it tells us how to process it. So what that means is the way JavaScript will process this will be different from how it will process this. The data type of a variable tells JavaScript how to process it. So the way to process this 7, which is a number, is different from the way it will process this 7, which is a string. So in our subsequent classes, we'll look more into this and understand this more. But just know that the way JavaScript will process a string is different from the way it will process a number, and is different from the way it will process a boolean. I think a good way to see that is this. Imagine this scenario. Imagine I say 7 minus 5. This will be 2. This will be 2. Now, but then, is it possible for me to say Taye minus 5? No. Like, how do you subtract 5 from something that is not a number? So that tells us that the data type will affect how JavaScript will process that thing. It's possible for me to subtract 5 from a number, but how do I subtract 5 from something that is not a number? So the data type of a variable will tell JavaScript how to process that variable, and we'll look more into that in our subsequent classes. I think in our next class, we should start JavaScript operations in our next class, so we'll understand this better. Let's move on. We want to look at the object data type. In JavaScript, this object data type has three categories. We have arrays, they are under objects. We have objects, they are under objects. We have null, they are under objects. But for now, ignore this and let me focus on this one. Object data type. This data type is usually used to keep multiple items. Look at this. Variable my name is, let's say, Taye. This is just one item. If I say my name equals to Kenny, it doesn't mean that we now have two items inside this container. It only contains just one item, because what this will do is that it will change the content of this container from Taye to Kenny, meaning that we still have only one item in the container. The question is, how then do we make our container to keep both Taye and Kenny together? This helps you, the object data type. And we have different types of objects. We have the arrays, we have the object itself, and we have null. So when we get there, we will look at it. Arrays, objects, and null. But this data type, ignore them for now. For a start, we'll only be considering this three. Then I don't want to forget this. We also have another data type called undefined. This undefined is similar to null, because ideally, in my own opinion, I don't think null should be under objects. Just my own opinion, because its own characteristic seems different from the rest. I believe it should be standing on its own, like undefined, because it's actually very similar to undefined. But then JavaScript groups it as objects. These ones, they are used to keep multiple items, to store a lot of items. But null is not like that. Let's discuss these two together. Remember I said null and undefined, they look similar. Both of them are used to denote emptiness. Both null and undefined, they are used to denote emptiness. But then there is a little difference between the two. If you create a variable and you do not put anything inside it, it is empty. If you create a variable and you put undefined inside it, it is still empty. Again, if I create a variable and I do not put anything inside it, if I say alert num, you will realize that it is undefined. It will give you undefined. By default, if there is nothing inside a variable, it is undefined. It is undefined. It is empty at that point. Now, but you can also set it. You can intentionally set it as undefined also. What I'm just saying is, I am intentionally setting it as undefined. Still make it empty. Still the same thing. Whether you write it like this or like this, both of them will make this variable empty. But how does null now come in? I will use an example, the one I used in that textbook. In the textbook, I explained that if you live in an apartment and let's say after spending some years in that apartment, you now decide to pack out. After packing your loads, we can say that the apartment is empty in one sense. But in another sense, we can say the apartment is not empty if you are yet to actually sweep it. If you are yet to sweep it, if you don't sweep it after packing your loads, it is empty in one sense. It is not empty in another sense. We can say it is empty because you've moved out of the apartment. We can say it is not empty because there are still debts. There are debts inside the apartment. In that case, we can liken it to undefined. Undefined means you are not intentionally putting something there. That is what undefined does. You are not intentional. It is empty. But just that, maybe you are not intentionally making it empty, but it is empty. I think the only exception to that is when you do something like this. That's the only exception to that. But most times, when you have a variable and you don't put anything inside, it is undefined. And again, imagine, and I use another example also. That imagine you have someone builds a house and leave the house for many years. The person did not complete it. Just the person attempted to build it, and the person after many years, the person didn't touch the house. You know, can we say the house is empty? Yes, in one sense. In one sense, it is empty because you didn't put anything, or the person did not put anything in that house. It is empty. In that case, it is undefined. But in another sense, we can say it is not empty because it will have glasses and other things with inside the house. So it is not empty in another sense. Just that the person is not intentionally placing something in that house. In that case, it is undefined. But let's now go back to the first example. When you now decide to clean it up, sweep it, mop it, clean up everywhere, then in that case, you are making it null. Back to the house also, I mean the uncompleted building. If you decide to clean up everywhere, make everywhere look so neat and all of that, in that case, you are making it null. Null is like you are intentionally making it empty. Undefined means, well, maybe not intentional. Now, there are different ways by which a variable can be undefined. Just like we said, it can be undefined, or a building can be undefined if you just moved out without cleaning it up. One, a building can also be undefined if it is built without touching it. So there are different ways by which a variable can be undefined. But the only way to make it null is to clean it up. Meaning the only way to make it null is to intentionally set it as null. But both of them still connotes emptiness. Just that one requires you to be intentional about it, while the other does not. But they are in that. But when you consider the fact that both of them are connote emptiness, then they are related together in that sense. And well, like I said, for reason best known to the JavaScript, those that developed JavaScript, null is put under objects. Undefined is standing on its own. Do you have any question?
Not yet. It's too clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
So look at these data types. These are data types in JavaScript. Null, number, boolean, string, undefined, object. And under objects we have these ones: arrays, objects, and null. And this will be a separate class, and this will be another class also on its own at the right time. But for now,
this is from here.
You said? Sir, what did you say, sir?
I lost you from the time you asked me if I had any question.
Okay.
I could not hear you since then.
Okay, sir. So I said for now we'll only be considering these ones. And okay, let's add these ones. But this object data type will be taken as separate classes. Like arrays will be a separate class. Objects will be a separate class. These two, they will be separate classes. Of course, this null, like I said, in my opinion, it should be a separate. It should be a separate data type.
It's standalone data type. Okay.
So for this investment, it is put under objects. Let's move on. Any question before we go to the next step?
No question.
Okay, so we are done with JavaScript data types. We want to go to JavaScript output commands. Output commands. Sister Moji, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you. Good
Hello.
evening, sir. Hello, good evening.
Hello. We can no longer hear you, Mr. Taiwo.
Can you hear me now?
Hello, sir.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. So we want to look at JavaScript output commands. Output commands are used to display things to users. And we've been...
You are off again.
You said?
We are going to JavaScript output command, that's the last point I can hear you.
Okay. JavaScript output commands. Output commands are used to display things to users. Can you hear that?
Okay, go on.
Okay. Output
Yes,
commands are
yes.
used to display things to users. We've looked at these two of them. We've looked at alerts. We've looked at, I think it's even more than two. Inner text. We've looked at value. So let's look at other output commands aside these three. The first I will look at tonight is the inner HTML. Inner HTML is an output command. Let's see how that works. I'll create a div. I'll give this div an ID. I'll say the ID is results. I'll come here and say results dot inner text equals to 7, and you know that when I get to the browser I'll see 7 inside this div, right?
Yes, yes.
This is the 7 here. Next, if I also say inner HTML and I run it, I will see 7. Inner text and inner HTML, in some sense, they are similar. They look alike. But then there is a difference between the two. Inner text does not understand HTML codes. Inner text does not understand HTML codes. Inner HTML understands HTML codes. Let's look at practical examples. I'll come here. Let's start with something. Of course, remember in today's class, what I explained earlier, I told us that if I remove this, to throw back an error because it will assume that this hello is a container. Abi.
Yes.
So I explained that if you run this will not work because it will assume that there's a container somewhere called hello, because hello is not a number, it's not a boolean, it's not a string. Sorry, it's not a number, it's not among all of this. It's not a number, it's not a boolean and all of that. So what you can do is you need to put it in quotes so that JavaScript can read it as ordinary text. So this will place hello inside the container. Let's move on. Now maybe I want to, I'm not just interested in placing hello. I want to place h2. h2. This is an HTML tag. h2 is an HTML tag. So let's run it and see how this looks like. This is rendering it as ordinary text. That's because we used inner text. If you change it to inner HTML, this understands HTML code and it will read this as HTML codes. Any questions?
Okay. Yeah, it's clear.
Okay. And it's even much more than this. You can style it here. Let's say color. Let's say yellow. See, it will still understand it. The color is yellow.
Okay. Now, is it not best practice to be writing HTML codes within maybe as something that looks like a value?
It's not something we will do often, but just that some situations might warrant it. But it's something we will rarely do.
Hello?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Oops. Hello?
I can hear you, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. So
my question was.
You can proceed. I can hear you.
Okay, so my question was, For best practice and not getting into trouble, is it beautiful to write HTML tags because of the power of inner HTML? Is it now great to be writing HTML tags as within, how do I call it now, as a value of an output? Yes, I'll put it like that.
Okay. For the most times you won't need to, but some situation might warrant it that you do. So depending on situations, along the line, as we
Okay.
work, we will consider some of these situations as we build projects together. You will see some situations that might warrant it, but it's something that will rarely happen. But just for us to know that this exists, and maybe because of working, you might, in the course of learning, while watching online video, you might see people use inner HTML, and you might be surprised. What is the meaning of inner HTML? Now you know what it means. It works like inner texts, just that it understands HTML code. In this case, it will work exactly like inner text because there is no HTML code. But immediately you have HTML codes, inner text cannot read HTML codes. Inner HTML can read HTML codes. That's the difference between the two. Do you understand it, sir?
Yes, that's got it.
Okay. Sister Moji, are we together? Maybe she's not with us. Let's look at another output command. We've looked at inner HTML. We want to look at the console.log. The console.log. What this does is, let's split it. It's like saying console plus log. We are saying log this to the console. Log something. We want to log something. We want to display something in the console. Now, we've known, at least in our last class, we realized that whenever there is a syntax error in our code, let's say I try to say alert taye, and of course this is a syntax error because there's no container called taye. So when there's a syntax error in our code, the console helps us identify it. If you check your console, you will have an error message. Taye is not defined. So we know that the console helps us to identify syntax error. But the work of the console is much more than that. In fact, it seems to be, to me, I believe is the most powerful output command. It is used to debug your codes. It is used to debug code, to understand where there is bugs in your code. See, the console can only identify syntax error. It cannot identify logic error. What does that mean? Imagine I have this here. Look at something. Okay, I'm coming. If I run this, what will I say as the value of A?
It will be 4.
Good, it will be 4. But maybe let's see first. It is 4, fine. But now imagine that I was expecting it to be maybe 6. It's possible. Because I might, this point, because we only have 3 lines of code or 4 lines of code on the page, it's easy for us to quickly identify that, oh, it is 12 on line 35, it is 4 on line 37. But imagine you have 100 lines of code or thousands lines of code in your application on the same page. You might not know that you've changed the value to something else along the line. You may not even remember. And you will now check it. Maybe you are expecting it. You are still expecting it to be 6. But on checking it, you now realize that it is 4. Just imagine that we have about 1,000 lines between this line 32 and line 35. Just imagine. Then imagine that we have another 1,000 lines between line 35 and 37. And maybe after writing many lines of code, you now decide to display the value of A. So you now saw 4 inside it, and you just can't remember, or you just can't figure out how the value of A changed to 4. Do we get it?
Yes, yes. Still following.
Okay. So the next is you now start debugging, because this is a syntax. This is a logic error, not a syntax error. Everything is slight with the syntax, but it is not just working as you expected it to work. Maybe, like I said, maybe you are expecting it to display 6. You just don't know that somehow along the line it has changed to 12, and it has even changed to 4. So how do you debug it? You use the console. Console is the easiest development tool. So you go to anywhere along, just jump to anywhere. Remember I said we have about 1,000 lines of code between this. The assumption is that we have about 1,000 lines of code between 32 and 35. So along the line, just check, you say console log A. That is, what you are saying is log the value of A to the console. So this will send the value of A to the console as at this point. Remember, the value of A at this point is 6, right?
Yeah.
Now, so it will log it to the console. Let's go to the console and see it. Oh, okay. Meaning that everything still seems right at that point. Everything seems right. Then next, you scroll down a bit, maybe and check again. Console log A. And again, the value of A is still 6. Okay, everything is still right to that point. Then you go again and console log A. Oh, the value of A is 12. Meaning that something has happened between these parts. So you now start looking at it closer. Okay, where is the exact place with the bug? Do you understand what is going on?
Yes, yes, yes.
So you start looking at it deeper. Okay, something happened around this part. You will log it till you get to it. You keep using console log. You keep logging it to the console log value. You log that value, maybe console log A, till you get to the exact point where the bug is. You could have, well, you can ask that why are we not using alert? Alert would have maybe done the same thing for us. But the issue with alert is that alert stops every other thing on the page until you close it.
Okay.
1. 2 is this. Well, console is for developers and it can take more things than alerts. When we get to objects, you will realize that you can send a lot of values to the console than using alert. Alert makes your debugging so easy. Console log makes your debugging so easy. So we'll be using the console as we debug. Of course, definitely, as we build applications, we will run into bugs. Like, it's not even negotiable. We will definitely run into bugs. Some things will not happen as expected, and we debug it together. And the more we debug it together, the more you understand how to use console log. The console log is mainly used for debugging. It's for you, the developer. It's for developer, not for users. Have you ever been to any website and go straight to their console? Well, I doubt if you have any reason to. Console is for the developers, not for the users. So you go to the console to debug. If there's any bug on the page, you use it to debug it to quickly know where the problem is. In fact, that's why if there is a syntax error in your code, it is sent to the console, because it is assumed that the console is for the developer to quickly debug your code. Any question?
No question yet.
Okay, we are stopping today. We are rounding off here today. In our next class, we are going to look at JavaScript operations. JavaScript operations.
Okay.
And that's why we're going to look at some of the operations that you can perform in JavaScript. Please, give us an assignment that we should build our portfolio.
Yeah.
Please, let's work on. We still have a lot of time to do that. But nothing we start working or we get to JavaScript events, assignment will start rolling in, and there may not be much time to do the previous assignments. This is the best time to quickly work on assignment before assignment starts rolling in. Again, I will remind us, go to the workbook section of that textbook, go to the chapters we treated tonight, then solve the questions in that part and see if you get it. If you get it, fine. If you miss it, read the solution there. The collections are also there, so read the solutions. We go to JavaScript operation on Tuesday. I think, is it Tuesday now? On Monday, sorry. On Monday. You check out that. Any question?
No question for now.
In absence of question, I wish us a lovely night. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much for your time. And thank you for teaching us clearly.